understanding on that issue. There was no scandal that was being unraveled here. So in the interest of time, and let me just usher us into our next conversation, which is really focused on African challenges and the nexus between clean energy and human dignity. And the crux of the matter here is basically SDG number 1, which is on eradication of poverty, and SDG number 7, which now focuses on affordable, sustainable, and accessible energy. And my panelists, it is my distinct honor, CS, I will have to bother you to welcome you back on stage. Please, if you don't mind. Dr. Kevin Kariuki, Vice President of Power, Energy, and Climate at the Africa Development Bank, should be joining us virtually. So our technical team, please have him on standby. Let me also welcome Paolo Lombardo, Head of Representation for East Africa at the EIB, right at the frontier. Please welcome on set. Sophie Odupoy, Head of Public Affairs, Coco Networks. Please join us also on stage. And Andrew Amadi, CEO, Kenya Renewable Energy Association. It was meant to be 1 hour, but in the interest of time, we shall keep it 30 minutes. So let me just welcome my panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's get this conversation going. And CS, allow me to start with you, because you laid the landscape in a very pragmatic way, and you talked about the state of play at Africa and in Kenya. And we're talking about affordability of energy here. So when you look at the multiplicity of shocks that we're looking at right now, the trick around this is normally 3 factors: low incomes, high energy demands, and high energy prices. How has the present environment impacted our capacity as far as the nexus between clean energy and human dignity? Because affordability is at the heart of human dignity. CS, please.
Well, thank you very much.
Sorry, your microphone, CS.
Thank you very much. And it is true. I mean, there is a direct link between the power to purchase or to produce and energy. And part of this, that is why there has been a deliberate effort of the government to keep the power prices low. You will know that one of the recommendations of the Presidential Task Force was to cut down the power tariff to 33%. And in January, we did manage to do the first tranche of that cutting. And then the crisis began. And so we've been trying very hard, as I'm sure you know, to maintain that cut, which for some consumers was actually more than 15%. And we've been looking at it and maintaining it at that level. So on 14th, as you will know, there was no increase in the power tariffs. And there's not going to be an increase in power tariff precisely because of that. Because we must cap it in order to allow for productivity to continue. And we also realize that the rise in petroleum prices is impacting the power to purchase of people in a significant way. Now, one of the things that we've been doing is to look at the entire ecosystem and to look at the operations in order to cut down on the losses. And that is going on. I have to say that we are impressed at the rate at which we are actually recouping losses. We are working to continue that, and we believe that we can reduce the losses substantially so that we keep the power tariffs lower as we go forward.
Thank you so much, CS, for your introductory thoughts. Let me come to Paolo here and really get the EIB perspective as far as the triple shocks that we are facing and how this is impacting the issue of human dignity and accessibility of energy. Please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? First of all, the fact that I'm not wearing a tie or a jacket is not due to climate change. I was not afraid of high temperature. I simply had to change car, and I left the jacket and the tie in the other car. So, all right, human dignity. It's a very good point. I think let me start with one remark that I'm both honored and humbled to be here. The reason why I'm humbled is because the EIB has been on a journey around climate change for decades. You probably know we're the climate bank of the EU, but I'm not trying here to promote EIB, but actually to make one important step in this journey. In 1977, we did an operation with KenGen. We have been working in Africa, in particular in Kenya, with KenGen. And partnering with KenGen, we have basically been able to support a level of ambition that the CS alluded to earlier, which is remarkable. I'm humbled because the result of that ambition is concrete. When you can claim that you actually have this level of renewable energy is simply amazing. And very few countries in the world can do that. So really, I cannot say how happy and pleased I am to have been associated with Kenya in this journey. What have we learned? We've learned that it's good for the planet. We've learned over time, as prices have gone down, that it's good for business. We're learning today, again, the CS alluded to it, that it's good for resilience. Now the question is it good for the poor? Is it good for the people in the streets? I think the answer is yes. Also, yes, but we could do more. The technology that comes with renewable energy has allowed for reaching areas in remote parts of Africa that before could not be reached. If you think of, for example, solar off-grid solutions. The technology has also enabled, bringing prices down, stable prices down, which is absolutely fundamental. So, but perhaps, we are, as EIB, in the business of promoting sustainable development. And for us, one of the key goals is to promote the conditions for job creation. Now, I was brought up by saying that, if you take away from a man or a woman the opportunity to work, you take away their dignity. What we have discovered over 40 years of climate action and introduction of climate projects is that you do create jobs. And this trickle-down effect then actually does reach also the least privileged. So climate change has actually triggered a positive spiral through the economy, through technology, that in my view will, going forward, support reducing poverty. I would like to say that in a country like Kenya that is particularly entrepreneurial and creative, the ongoing and future electrification that will be driven by renewable power will create new jobs, will support new industries, and therefore create those jobs for people that today are entering the market, in particular the youth. So I'm very optimistic. Thank you.
Allow me to respectfully hold you there and go cross over to Sophie Odupoy for her introductory thoughts. Sophie, if you read the Kenyan energy policy, and I'll read it for you, the mission is to provide clean, sustainable, affordable, competitive, reliable, and secure energy at least cost while protecting the environment. So many times you have this conversation and you'll be told it feels like a macro level, policy only, preserve. When you cascade it to the micro level, what are some of the things being done there?
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be part of this panel. I represent Coco Networks, and Coco Networks is a player within the private sector. For us, we provide a clean and renewable, affordable cooking solution. So aligning very well with what CS alluded to, we are seeking to address the issue of people using firewood and charcoal and all that comes with using dirty cooking fuels. So when you think about the challenges that the people face, the people who use firewood and charcoal are not you and me. You and I, we use LPG. So we are not privy to the challenges these people face. The girl child or the woman has to wake up every day and go look for firewood. Firewood is increasingly becoming scarce. When we talk about charcoal, there's a logging ban in place. There are no trees to be cut down. So the charcoal that is available illegally, is even expensive. As Cocoa, we looked through what option can we avail to these consumers. The answer lay in technology. And that is what is underpinning a lot of the conversations today and definitely tomorrow. Ours is an innovative solution. We looked at how can we work with infrastructure in place, how can we develop a system that enables us to get we use ethanol, we use bioethanol. How do we get the bioethanol to the consumer in an affordable manner? So we have worked and we continue to work closely with government because this is a government commitment in terms of policy, universal clean cooking access by 2028. It is not possible for government to achieve this without private sector. We are able to scale rapidly. We have been in the market since October 2019. Last night, we sold our 500,000 cooker in Kenya. So we have proven what CS alluded to. We have to be deliberate, and it has to be scalable. We are present in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu. But we still have to provide for the rural setting, because that is where over 70% of the people who use firewood and charcoal are, and in terms of poverty, are the people facing this challenge. So we are in continuous engagement with government over how we can scale this solution and make it affordable. The rural person will not be able to pay the price that an urban consumer can pay. So it's important for us to bring this policy level to the micro level. As you're saying, we need to be able to say, this cooker is now affordable to you in the rural setting and you can easily access it. We need to be able to have a network coverage that is comparable to mobile telephony. You need to be able to walk out of your house and be able to buy ethanol as the alternative fuel. So it's something that private sector and government have to consistently work together. Neither can walk the journey alone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for those thoughts. And let me just piggyback on what you've talked about as far as scalability is concerned. As I cross over to Andrew Amadi from the Kenya Renewable Energy Association, scalability around renewable energy solutions, many people will tell you the cost is extremely inhibitive. What's your perspective and what are some of the solutions we can harness to address this?
Thank you, Son. Thank you very much for that question on the scalability. I would be remiss without first acknowledging the topic for discussion, which is around the clean energy and human dignity as being center to even how we are going to design the scalability. So the scalability, like rightfully mentioned, the upfront cost of renewable energy is typically high. But the advantage of renewable energy is that you have either low or no operating costs. So the challenge in terms of getting access is usually not so much a technical problem as it is a financial and structuring problem. Technology is where it is and where we have reached today. I can say without fear or favor that we do have the technology to be able to scale up to where we need to go. So one of the things that we are looking at as the Kenya Renewable Energy Association is breaking down the barriers for collaboration to scaling up. We have many people developing many individual projects, but there isn't sufficient coordination for them to be able to benefit from the economies of scale that become possible. Let's take, for example, the conversation, since we're here, we're having around cooking, clean cooking, and we have now reached at least a level of critical mass of 500,000 users, which is a great milestone compared to the path that even LPG took to get to that number. And the way that we have seen collaboration working is in decentralized systems that are distributed. Today, if we want to produce ethanol efficiently for the whole country, we need to be producing it everywhere where we can be able to do it. It is earlier stated that we are in a drought season. We need to be doing this under irrigation. We need to be going for the water that is difficult to get, solar water pumping. This is totally different from the type of irrigation where we have had large centralized systems to be able to deploy. When it is decentralized, when it is efficient, then it can be scaled up at a very fast period. And I think that is what we are looking at. And it's also good that we have with us the European Investment Bank, because we have just, as the Kenya Renewable Energy Association, submitted a proposal whereby we want to provide rooftop solar for healthcare facilities. And the next phase is also to be able to do it in a decentralized system for solar water pumping for irrigation to be able to ensure food security.
Andrew, may I please hold you there? And Andrew clearly hasn't missed an opportunity for a pitch to EIB. Fantastic on you there. Let me cross over to Dr. Kevin Kariuki from AFDB, who's joining us virtually. Dr. Kariuki, if you can hear us, what's the bank doing as far as this issue of energy and human dignity is concerned? Dr.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, in order to be able to reach the rural areas, that's where you have most of the people not having access, the critical thing is to use distributed renewable energies. And this is off-grid systems, solar grid, mini grids, as well as solar home systems. And this is in realization of the fact that it is expected that by 2030, 50% of new connections will be through what we call the distributed renewable energies. This is why, as a bank, we have been at the forefront of building Africa's mini-grid sector. And to date, we have committed $200 million for mini-grid technical assistance and financing programs, comprising 13 countries and 5 regional programs, while also sponsoring investments-focused funds, such as what we call the Facility for Energy Inclusion. It's a $500 million facility that aims to provide debt financing for small-scale energy access projects, or what I call off-grid small independent power producers, as well as captive installations and mini-grids. And this is very, very important because I think we also need to move the narrative from just talking about access, because we need to move the realm of productive use of energy. Because to date, the statistics are not very much in favor of Africa. If you look at the per capita consumption of electricity in Africa, it's about 200 watt hours per year, which is actually less than what a 50-watt bulb would consume in a year. We really need to change the narrative and talk about access and enhancing productive use of energy. These are areas that we are very, very keen to support in order to be able to improve not just access, but also to help in fostering meaningful utilization of energy.
Thank you, Dr. there for your thoughts as far as this is concerned. Unfortunately, because of time, we have to get into our closing remarks. And let me just start with Lombardo here with me. And if you could maybe address the issue that CS raised, that part of access and human dignity deals with the issue of the far-flung communities which don't have access to the national grid. What are some of the solutions you would think would be ideal? We know the EPRA already had the draft mini-grid regulations, seeing how we can crowd in private capital into this. Very briefly.
Very briefly, this solution is indeed around the private sector. So what the private sector requires is clear legislation, a stable legislation, and a supportive environment. As far as we're concerned, the supportive environment rotates around, obviously, liquidity, but also risk mitigation. Without appropriate, well-designed risk mitigation, this transition will not be as good as it should be.
Thank you so much for your closing thoughts. Let me cross over to Sophia Dupoy. There's a question here from the virtual platform, and let me ask this. What is your view as far as the landscape is concerned when it comes to e-cooking? I believe this is right down your alley.
Okay. In terms of clean cooking, there are various options. Bioethanol is just one of the options. As you said, e-cooking, and that is use of electricity is another option. It's not as used, I guess, because you also need specific cooking equipment. But it's something that is up and coming. I think Kenjan is working closely with KPLC to make this a reality. So there are a number of options available that would suit any pocket. We still have to walk the journey of creating awareness so that people know these options are available and be able to pick the option that suits them best. Since I have this option, I just also want to say one thing. As Cocoa Networks, we handle the downstream. So we endeavor to deliver an affordable solution and the ethanol to the end user. The challenge we face as supplying the downstream is in terms of getting ethanol. We know ethanol is a byproduct of molasses, a byproduct of the sugar milling process. We currently do not get enough within not only Kenya, but also the East African community. So essentially, we are having to import something that we actually can produce locally in Kenya, and it can bring income into the pockets of farmers and can also generate jobs. In June 2020, we launched this document. It's the Kenya Ethanol Cooking Fuel Master Plan, and it articulates what it would take to set up an ethanol industry in Kenya. There is an actual opportunity for us to not only provide income, but to have a homegrown solution that empowers people and that enables us to solve this issue of dirty cooking fuels in a clean, renewable, and affordable manner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sophie, for that. Andrew Amadi, your closing thoughts, and that really I want you to speak to the issue that Paulo here raised as far as the predictability of the policy environment is concerned, particularly when you come to issues such as taxation.
Thank you. In fact, that has been one of the major challenges for renewable energy. Kenya is rightfully now a superpower as far as renewable energy uptake and usage is concerned, not only in Africa, but globally. However, the unpredictable tax regime, as much as, yes, we have been able to get tax exemption and VAT exemption on certain products and qualities, but the challenge of not knowing if it is going to be taken out, the resources we have to spend every year lobbying and advocating for an environment is actually a delay in the process. And just for the benefit of Dr. Kiboro, who said you're not an energy expert, I am an energy expert since I've been in Form 3, and related to this same issue. Today, the LPG 13 kilogram cylinder is actually more expensive than cooking with electricity. So you can actually cook with electricity, which is from renewable sources and is cheaper than LPG. I just needed to say that so that you can take home some information that can be beneficial in terms of creating consumer awareness about the issues. And how we are tracking this, both the tax regime and the pricing, is with the Kenya Renewable Energy Price Index, which is published on the 15th of every month. And what we do is compare all energy types using the same units. So that way it is clear from the index that renewable energy is not only the cheapest, but it is also now the most affordable energy source. And as we address the barriers to scale up, then it becomes available, then we can be able to restore dignity to every village, every person in this country, because everyone has access to renewable energy.
The Kenya Energy Renewable Price Index published every 15th of the month, right a day after EPRA has published the palm prizes. So what a synchrony of time there. Let me cross over to Dr. Kariuki from AFDB. If you're still with us, your closing thoughts on this subject of electricity, clean energy rather, and human dignity, and what we can do to crowd in private capital.
When it comes to what the bank can do, the first thing that already in Kenya, we participated in the last mile connectivity project. And as a result, statistics CS Juma spoke about.
Sorry, Dr. We are having a challenge hearing you clearly. Are we okay on the technical side? Dr. Could you please start again? Please unmute, Dr. All right, I think let's come back to the floor. CS, Dr. Monica Juma, there's a question here for you as we try to get back to Dr. here. And really, Danson Ligare, energy expert from Kakamega County, is asking, why is it that the feed-in tariffs for biomass waste energy is always low, while the government advocates promotion of alternative, clean, and renewable energy sources? So this is someone speaking to the issue of the feed-in tariffs and how we can see that we are creating an environment whereby it is promoting private participation into this. Also, another question is, what is the government position on this subject of environmentally friendly cooking? Maybe you can start with the second one.
No, thank you very much. Let me just start by saying, the last 10 years or 15 years, we have learned a number of lessons. Yeah, we've learned a number of lessons. First of all, lessons around access and the value of access, and it comes back to the question around dignity. Now, every point of this country that you go, small market, you can see the translation of access to power and productive use of that power. And during COVID, it was very interesting to watch young people and older people work from rural areas because it was possible to have connectivity. And it is interesting to look at the numbers of young people that went online for work during that period. So I'm speaking to the question about meaningful use of access and why access is very, very important. But critically, the question around crowding capital for access in the far-flung areas is absolutely essential. And the issue around structuring the right partnerships, because we've had a situation where you have off-grid investment that becomes too expensive and that creates a crisis between the possible potential users and the investors. And so this question around structuring partnerships is one of the big issues that we are dealing with. So there is a template that is well understood that shares both the burden and risks. Shares burdens and risks, because the problem we've been having is a situation where we are having structures that favor, in a matter of returns, the investors rather than the users of power. And this is what we are trying to correct, because we believe as government that it is possible to have frameworks that share burden, that realize the mandate of providing low-cost renewable energy to the users that makes it more productive. So this question around the character of relationships is very important. Of course, the next thing is the issue around policies. Now, in the renewable sector, and this is something we must be alive to, the level of flexibility and innovation, it is moving very, very, very quickly. And so in terms of just the policy and legal framework and regulations, sometimes we are running after the innovation, which is not a bad thing in a country that is full of innovation like ours. And so what that asks for, it is really creating a versatility and agility within the planning sections of the government. It is not an indicator of failure of commitment. It is that if you look at the innovation in clean cooking, for example, the degree of innovations, the speed of the innovation, the change in the technology requires adjustment so that we can have a framework that is predictable, that is understood by all. So the commitment of government is there, it is firm, and we are walking this journey together. Right now, we are developing almost 33 regulations, because of the level of interest. If you're talking about, for example, captive power, feed-in tariff, clean cooking, efficiency, all these things, and they all must be regulated so that it is clear what we are all doing. So the commitment of government is clean. When we are talking about off-grid, we are also talking about off-grid and support to Kenya's innovation, which is completely different, but it has to be adapted to our country so that we are relevant to the needs of our people and not to bring templates that are coming from elsewhere. So it is this agility that we must all think through in the next 2 days, what it looks like. That's why I was talking about nuancing the framework of access to the green financing.
Thank you, CS. And I think the take home there is sharing the opportunity as well as the risk, because that is basically the balance that we need to have a trade-off on. If we have Dr. Kariuki with us and possibly on a clearer line, I just need to get your closing thoughts. Then I shall come to CS again for our closing thoughts because she needs to wrap up the panel for us. Dr. are you there with us?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, it is better.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. To start with, as CS Monica Juma said, Kenya has seen a significant increase in the number of connections. And I'm proud to say that the bank was integral to that particular project. We financed part of the project, and as a result, today we are sitting at 80% access in electricity in Kenya. We believe that we contributed to about 2.3 million increased access, new customers in Kenya. But in terms of the way forward, I do believe that it is absolutely essential that we adopt public-private partnerships, increase private sector participation in the sector in order to be able to complement the government's efforts in providing resources for electrification. In this regard, again, the bank is very keen to support in enabling environments that are required for greater private sector participation in power. Of course, we hear what CS Monica Juma talks about, the issue and the need to ensure there is equitable sharing of risks. But finally, one of the things that I am very particular about is the issue of tariffs. You know, I always say that it is very essential that any power sector is premised on cost-reflective tariffs. And when you say cost-reflective tariffs, it means that either the tariffs are, because there are only two sources of revenue for the sector. Either the customers pay for the tariffs or the government provides subsidies. And until you are able to have sustainable tariffs in the sector, then it will also be difficult to attract private sector investment. So I think we need to look at how we can be able to develop a regime of truly cost-reflective tariffs and in the fullness of time, considering the tremendous and abundant resources of renewable that we have in Kenya and other parts of Africa. I mean, for your own, for your information, Africa has 40% of the global solar potential, of which less than 1% has been harnessed. So there are sources that can be able to make it cheaper. But to be able to attract private sector investments, you need two things. You need affordable tariffs, or what you call sustainable tariffs that can be able to support the industry. And also, you need to reduce the losses, because when you lose losses, system losses, it simply means that there are some customers who are sort of using energy that is paid by somebody else. So as far as I'm concerned, those are some of the key things that we need to look at. We need to look at affordability of tariffs and greater private sector participation in the power sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Terry, really taking us through the structuring of tariffs and whether they justify a business case at the end of the day. CS, let me come to you for your closing thoughts. And really, there's a question here on Twitter. And CS, with your permission, I'll ask this question because this gentleman is asking, 3 months ago, you sat down with CS Monica Juma on this issue of energy reforms. She promised you the second reduction in tariffs by March 31. It hasn't happened. CS, as you take your closing remarks, maybe you can respond to that.
Thank you very much. A direct answer to that question is that the reduction is predicated on the context, yeah? That the commitment of the government to reduce tariffs still stands. That in fact, if you look at the structure of those tariffs, there were categories who received a tariff reduction of more than 15%, that we are working on our operations to make sure that we can respond to that. But it must be taken within the context of the layered crises that I am talking about, because this does not happen outside of that real context. So I think that is the answer. We have not effected the second tranche. We are working on it, and a lot of it we are looking at a possibility of disaggregating the various categories so that we can still push it, particularly to the most affected strata of society. So it is not an agenda that has been dropped from the government perspective. We are still working on it. In terms of closing, I want to make 3 points, very quick point. The first is that as a country, we are luckier than many other countries of the world. There are very few countries that have the benefit of the quantum of renewable resources and variety and diversity of it. And so we are placed in a very good place in terms of the resource. So, and this should be an attractive, something that is attractive even in terms of calling out for the private sector. So it reduces risk significantly. Let's put it that way. Secondly, as we move further and further on the renewable journey, I think there are a number of technological issues that need to be addressed, and I hope some of that conversation will come through here. How do we deal with intermittency? How do we deal with mixing? That whole area of accessories, storage, these are big issues that we need to respond to, because the technology is still evolving, you know, and until we have the comfort that we are not going to develop power that we are going to vent. If we were able to store all the geothermal power steam that we are generating, it would go a long way in terms of responding to some of these things. So discussions around the technology of storage and how we can fast track that, and how we can have partnerships that have confidence in order to help us develop this, which is why I was talking about sustainability and the component of technology in accessing the green financing. I think this is extremely important to give us comfort, but also not to push the cost higher, because the idea is to push it lower rather than higher. Number 3 is a question around the social and the productive, quote unquote, because even social, I believe, is productive too. But as we move towards the 20% of access, the final access, this is the most difficult because it becomes less and less commercially viable. And so the comfort of partnership that separates the commercial and the social service component of access to power becomes very important. And so how we structure that becomes very, very useful as well. Because it cannot be we are going for the full investment CapEx portfolio for far-flung off-grid, off the national grid, because it will not be viable and it is likely to push the prices higher. So how do we structure the financing for this and the support for the social service side as opposed to the industrial and productive side of the equation?
CS Ambassador Dr. Monica Juma, thank you so much for your closing thoughts. And that point of financing and the structuring of it, by the way, will be the introductory point in our second panel. And I will request your indulgence because we are skipping the tea break in the interest of redeeming time. We have also slashed this panel by half the time it was allocated. My panelists, thank you so much. Allow me at this point to usher you back to your seats. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation and sharing very invaluable insights. Asanteni sana. CS, please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those points. We really appreciate that insight. Now, our next conversation is on financing sustainable energy, as the CS just helped us to pivot into it. And to set the scene for that, I want to welcome on stage Judith Kuria, the head of Sovereign and Public Sector, KCB Corporate Banking, and Tilana de Melon, Senior Operations Officer, Infrastructure, Upstream Africa at the International Finance Corporation, to come and make 5 minutes of remarks each, so that then we can have our panel getting on set. Please.
I can send it by email quickly. Okay, sure. I don't start there.
Please bear with us. Please bear with us. Kindly bear with us. We're trying to see if we can get a presentation projected here. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Tilana de Melon. I'm a Senior Operations Officer at the International Finance Corporation. I want to thank everyone for being here and thank you for the opportunity to present, for all the esteemed guests and everyone that made the time to come all the way to Naivasha, such a lovely place. I want to touch on a few points today, and I think some of them the previous speakers and panelists have already touched on. Only 5 points. The first one is about private sector involvement in development. The IFC is the largest global development institution focused primarily on supporting private sector investments. We are a member of the World Bank Group, and we advance economic development and improves lives of the people by encouraging the growth of the private sector in developing countries. So our focus are mostly in development countries, and we believe in partnerships with private sector. Our products and services are market related, and we basically believe in a conversation should start from a much more productive vantage point, that we focus on opportunities rather than all the challenges that we see today in Africa. We so often go and think, oh, you know, this is wrong and that is wrong, and we have this challenge and we have that challenge. But really, Africa has so much to offer. I think we've touched on this, the amount of renewable resources that's available, the amount of expertise in the private sector, the amount of financing that is available, should we be able to develop these projects to an extent where they make sense and they add value. So I think that is really my focus and the focus of the IFC in general, to support these types of projects going forward. I'm not sure you're able to put that up yet.
I'll have a challenge with that.
Okay. Sorry. So I had a small presentation, but I'm told that there are some challenges. So let's continue. I want to start with an example of renewable IPPs. I think you would remember that about 20 years ago, there were no private sector participation in IPPs, independent power producers in Africa. Yet today it's commonplace. Utilities look at the private sector to develop these projects. And I think that is the way how we think that other projects in difficult markets and also in newer technologies can go as well. So we believe that you don't, historically, the financiers, the project developers and governments were separate entities and stood apart. But we believe that there needs to be much more closer collaboration and partnerships to be able to make these projects a success, because every party can bring their part, and also to reflect the risks at the right place, as our previous speaker from the AFTB also mentioned. Our approach is therefore to start at early stages in the project already, but even at a sector level. So in certain instances, there are projects that's successfully been implemented in other jurisdictions, like in South America, in Russia, in any other jurisdiction that could potentially be implemented successfully in Africa in some form or fashion. So looking at developing the sector and the market, but also in developing projects itself from early stages. And so we try to take a comprehensive lens, starting from the market scoping to project preparation, and then culminating in investment making. How do we support early stage generation? We support by leading and funding and making our internal expertise available, things like feasibility studies, market scoping, diagnostics, environmental and impact assessment, and so forth. We then support, and that we call the early development stage. We then support development of the projects itself, following confirmation of their feasibilities by contributing resources and funding for the execution of the development activities. There we are talking about structuring the project, tendering the project, securing this party to develop, implement and operate the project, etc. And then finally, to contribute resources and funding for the execution of the project itself. We believe that our value add is in ensuring that the projects are bankable, finally. We know that there's a lot of opportunities. As I said, there's a lot of projects that really sound like it has such opportunity to be successful, but there is a need to sometimes develop it further, and not always enough funds to get to the point where the financing would be available. And therefore, we need to find the support to ensure that these projects are bankable. And then we conclude then by providing either debt or equity financing and even mobilizing third-party capital to fund and execute the project. So as part of the development support, IFC employs a variety of investment tools. We believe that it's more than just traditional funding that is required.